All right, let's dive in. We're tackling Atomic Habits today by James Clear.
Oh, a classic.
Yeah, it's basically become like the self-help go-to for how making little changes can make a huge difference in your life.
It's funny how some books just hit at the right time,
Yeah.
you know? And this one, I think, really makes you think about how much power you actually have to change things in the future
Yeah, for sure.
just by being consistent and, focusing on the small stuff.
I love that. And Clear's not just all talk.
Oh, yeah.
His own story is a pretty powerful example of this whole atomic habits thing.
Yeah, for sure.
He had this awful baseball injury when he was in high
I
school.
remember reading about it.
Multiple fractures in his face, the whole work, and he basically had to like start from scratch rebuilding his life.
What's interesting to me is how he used those principles he was writing about during his own recovery.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like it magically cured him or anything,
Yeah.
but by zeroing in on those small wins and just being consistent, he was able to achieve some pretty great things.
Exactly. And that's where this whole idea of tiny gains comes in, right? It's like
Yeah.
that compound interest idea, but for self-improvement.
Totally. He uses this really great example of an ice cube to get this point across. So imagine you're slowly raising the temperature of an ice cube
Okay.
from, say, 25 degrees to 31 degrees.
Okay.
You're not going to see anything changing on the outside,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then, bam, you hit 32 degrees, that melting point,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden it's water.
That's such a good way to explain it.
Yeah.
So even though we might not see results like right away when we're making those small changes, things are happening behind the
Yeah.
scenes, right? He calls this the plateau of latent potential, right?
You got it. It's that point where you feel like you're putting in the work, but you're not getting anywhere.
Right.
But it's so important to trust the process,
Yeah.
to keep showing up because those tiny gains that are adding up,
Hmm.
they're going to lead to a breakthrough eventually.
So if these small habits are so powerful, what makes them stick? Why do some become part of our lives while others just kind of disappear?
One of the things I find most interesting about Atomic Habits is how clear links habits to our sense of self.
Oh, interesting.
He says our habits aren't just things we do, they're like reflections of who we think we are.
So if I see myself as a healthy person, I'm more likely to make healthy choices.
Exactly. And he has research to back this up.
Oh, cool.
It talks about voting.
Okay.
Studies have shown that people who think of themselves as a voter are much more likely to actually vote than
Interesting.
those who just say they're going to vote.
Right.
It's about matching what you do with how you see yourself.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So how do we actually build these good habits and break the bad ones?
Claire breaks it down with this thing he calls the habit loop.
Okay.
It's a 4-step cycle. Cue, craving, response, reward.
Okay.
Basically, a cue triggers a craving, which leads to a response, which is the habit itself,
Right.
and then a reward, which makes you want to do it again.
So let's say I have this habit of snacking on junk food in the afternoon.
Okay, yeah.
The cue might be feeling bored or stressed.
Yeah.
The craving is for something sweet or salty.
Mm-hmm.
The response is grabbing that bag of chips.
Right.
And the reward is that quick hit of satisfaction you get from the sugar or salt.
Perfect example. And once we understand this habit loop, we can start to pinpoint those triggers and cravings
Yeah.
and find ways to either break the cycle or swap in healthier responses.
And that brings us to Clear's habits scorecard, right?
Yes.
It's like taking stock of all the habits you have,
Yeah.
the good, the bad, and the ugly.
It's about shining a light on those things we do without even thinking.
Yeah.
Clear compares this to how Japanese railway conductors work.
Oh, really?
They have this system called pointing and calling to make sure everything runs smoothly and reduce errors.
Wait, they actually point at things and say what they're doing out loud?
Yep. Might seem a little odd,
Yeah.
but it forces them to be super aware of what they're doing, even the things they do all the time.
That makes sense.
And this awareness is key for both safety and for changing our habits.
So just by being more mindful of our habits, we can start making better choices about what we want to change.
Exactly. And this leads to one of the biggest ideas in Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
Our environment shapes our habits way more than we realize.
So it's not just about willpower, it's about setting yourself up for success.
Yes,
By making your surroundings work for you.
exactly. Clear gives the example of redesigning a workspace
Okay.
to cut down on wasted movement and make it easier to be productive.
Okay.
It's about getting rid of obstacles and making the good behaviors the easiest option.
That's brilliant. So instead of relying on willpower alone, We can strategically change our environment to make good habits the obvious choice.
Exactly. And it's not just our physical environment that matters either.
Right.
Our social environment is huge.
Oh, yeah. We all know how easy it is to pick up bad habits from the people around us, late night pizza with friends, anyone.
Exactly. We're social creatures. We want to fit in to belong. And that can really influence our habits. We naturally do what our friends are doing.
Clear talks about this with his friend Mike, who started smoking because everyone around him was doing it.
Yeah.
It just goes to show how powerful that can be.
It's a good reminder to think about who you're spending time with
Yeah.
and how that might be shaping your habits without you even realizing it.
So we've got environment design, social influences. What about motivation? Where does that fit in?
Clear digs into the whole world of dopamine and how it impacts our habits.
Dopamine.
Yeah, it's a neurotransmitter.
Okay.
It's all about pleasure and reward, and it plays a key role in how our brains learn and do things over and over again.
And this is where things get tricky, right?
Yeah.
Because our brains are wired to chase those dopamine hits.
Yes.
Even if they're not good for us.
Exactly. He talks about how the food industry, for example, is amazing at using our dopamine systems
Oh, wow.
to create products that are packed with sugar, salt, and fat.
Yeah.
Stuff our brains are hardwired to crave.
So it's like our brains haven't quite caught up to this world of endless food and processed stuff.
Right.
But there's got to be a way to break free from those cravings, right?
One of Clear's big strategies is finding what he calls the Goldilocks rule.
Okay.
It's about finding that sweet spot of challenge.
Okay.
If something's too easy, we get bored too hard, we get discouraged.
It's all about balance.
Exactly.
Finding that challenge that keeps you going without making you feel overwhelmed.
You got it. And this applies to everything. Learning a new skill, building a business, creating healthy habits.
Yeah.
It's about finding that sweet spot where the challenge is just right to keep you moving forward and growing.
This has been so insightful. We've covered so much tiny gains, the habit loop, environment design, social influence, and dopamine's role in habits. Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
What other gems does Atomic Habits have for us?
Well, we've talked a lot about setting ourselves up for success with good habits, but what about those bad habits?
Oh, yeah.
The ones that just won't seem to go away.
They can be tough to break.
They really can. One of the most effective ways to deal with them is to make them harder to do.
Make them harder how?
Increase the friction.
Okay.
Make them inconvenient. Make them difficult. Even make them a little bit unpleasant.
So, like, instead of relying on willpower to resist those chips, I could just make them harder to get to.
Exactly.
Maybe hide them away or not even have them in the house.
You got it. You're adding friction, making it less tempting to give in to that habit.
I like that it's like setting up roadblocks for your bad habits.
Exactly. Clear actually uses this really cool historical example.
Oh, what's that?
The invention of the cash register.
Okay.
Back in the day, before cash registers, employee theft was a big issue for businesses.
Makes sense.
But when they started using cash registers, it suddenly became a lot harder to steal.
Right.
And theft went way down.
Wow. I never thought about it like that, but it makes sense.
It's about designing your environment to make those bad habits almost impossible.
So we can make bad habits harder. And what about making good habits easier?
Exactly. That's where habit tracking and accountability come in.
Ah, yes. Habit tracking, it's everywhere these days.
It is, but it really does work.
Okay.
It gives you this visual proof of your progress,
Yeah.
which can be super motivating.
Right.
And then having an accountability partner adds this extra layer of commitment.
Oh, yeah, like having someone to answer to.
It makes you much more likely to stick with your goals.
I read about this entrepreneur, Brian Harris.
Yeah.
He actually lost a bunch of weight using a habit contract he made with his wife and his trainer.
Oh, wow.
He basically made it more painful to not follow through.
That's a great example of how accountability can really change the game.
For sure, it adds that extra push and support to help you stay on track.
Exactly. So we've covered practical strategies for building good habits and breaking bad ones.
Yeah.
But there's another really interesting aspect to atomic habits.
What's that?
The idea of finding your strengths and playing to them.
I like that idea.
Yeah. It takes those habit ideas and connects them to a bigger picture.
Okay.
One of purpose and fulfillment.
Okay.
He argues that we're more likely to be successful and happy when we align our habits with our natural talents.
So it's not just about working hard, it's about working hard on the right things.
Exactly. The things that come naturally to you.
Right.
He uses the example of Michael Phelps, the swimmer,
Oh, yeah.
and Hicham El Guerrouj, the runner,
Okay.
both incredibly successful, but in completely different sports.
Right. They were built for those sports.
Exactly. Phelps, with his long torso and huge arms, perfect for swimming, and El Guerrouj, lean and light, a natural runner.
It's a good reminder that we all have our own unique strengths.
We do.
And if we can identify those strengths and build habits that support them,
Yeah.
we can set ourselves up for success and create a life that feels right for us.
It's about playing a game where you have an advantage.
Mm. Now that we've gone through all the basics of atomic habits,
Yeah.
what about those times when motivation just dips and we don't feel like sticking to our habits?
Yeah.
Any advice for those tough moments? It's like that midweek slump, But for like self-improvement,
Right?
you
Yeah.
start the week strong, all excited about those new habits.
Mm-hmm.
Then Wednesday hits.
Mm-hmm.
You're hitting snooze on the alarm and the chips are calling your name.
Happens to the best of us. And that's why having a system is so key.
Right.
A way to keep going even when you don't feel like it. Right. Remember that plateau of latent potential?
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you don't see the results right away.
Right.
And it's tempting to quit when you don't see those quick wins.
It's easy to get discouraged when you feel like you're putting in the effort, but nothing's happening. So how do we deal with that?
Yeah. How do we stick with it when motivation dips?
Exactly.
Well, Claire has some really good advice for this. First off, remember that messing up is totally normal.
Okay.
It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress.
I like that.
He actually has a strategy for dealing with those slip-ups.
Oh, really?
Their never miss twice rule.
Never miss twice. Okay, I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
So it's all about getting back on track as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
After you miss something, so let's say you miss a workout.
Right.
Don't let it turn into 2 missed workouts.
Right.
Or if you skip a day of writing,
Yeah.
make sure you write the next day.
Okay.
The key is to stop that chain of missed chances before it gets out of control.
So it's about recognizing that we all slip up.
Yeah,
It's not a big deal.
exactly.
It's about what we do after that matters most.
It's about being resilient, about being committed to getting back on track.
I like that.
And it goes back to that idea of identity.
Oh, yeah.
If you see yourself as someone who sticks to their habits,
Right.
then one slip-up doesn't define you.
Okay.
You acknowledge it, you learn from it, and you keep going.
Such a good way to look at it. But let's be real. Sometimes the hardest part is just starting.
Oh, yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with all of this?
Right.
Clear's advice is pretty simple, actually. Start small, like ridiculously small.
Okay.
He calls it the 2-minute rule.
2 minutes, that doesn't seem like enough time to get anything done.
That's the point. The goal is to make it so easy to start that you can't say no.
Hmm.
So instead of trying to write a whole chapter,
All right.
just write one sentence.
Okay.
Instead of going for a long run, just put on your shoes and step outside.
It's like tricking your brain into taking action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're removing that first obstacle, that resistance.
Right.
And once you've taken that first step, even a tiny one,
Yeah.
you're way more likely to keep going.
Okay.
You've broken through that inertia, and that little win gives you momentum.
Wow, this whole conversation has been amazing.
Yeah, it's been great.
It's incredible how Clear takes these big ideas
Mm-hmm.
and makes them easy to understand and put into action.
He does.
It's not about some huge life makeover. It's about those small, consistent actions,
Yeah.
the tiny changes that add up over time.
And that's what I love about Atomic Habits. It gives you the power to take charge of your life one small habit at a time.
I like that.
It's about understanding that the choices we make every day, those little choices,
Yeah.
they shape who we become.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into atomic habits,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with a question. What's one tiny habit you could start today that would make a difference a year from now?
That's a good one to think about.
The power is in your hands. Even the smallest things, when you do them consistently, can make a huge difference.
They really can.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another exciting journey into the world of ideas.